Bonsoir Khala Khala. Michael. Tando. Yeah.
What a beautiful afternoon. We're here in the Northern Cape, Kimberley City Hall this afternoon, of course, attending COMFESA Symposium in this session. And this time around, we have a beautiful discussion, as always, where we discuss issues of choral advancement and generally what we should be doing different in terms of advancing classical music. And of course, with me are these professionals that are going to introduce themselves. Igama lami nguTimothy Wakazulu. I am the Secretary General of COMFESA and the lover of this thing we do here. But then, I'm going to start with the lady in the middle. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is Bongile Mngoma. I am a musician, practitioner, teacher, coach, and activist.
And of course, we saw her earlier on doing some wonderful things on the masterclass, and thank you for being with us today. So please introduce yourself.
My name is Meriki Mukhadi. I am a singer, I'm a tenor soloist. I'm a member of the Northern Cape Choristers. I'm actually part of the LOC for COMFESA as well. Thank you.
And of course, there's one gentleman that was busy with the choral conducting masterclass. But it's right now. Please introduce yourself, Mike.
Ngiyabingelela igama uMichael Dingano kwaMnguni. I'm a musician, and it's a great honor to be amongst these esteemed panelists. Thank you.
And of course, on the far end is one of the most important people in COMFESA. He is the member of the board. Please introduce yourself, Baba Khosi.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm quite excited to be here. My name is Khosi Munaisa. I'm a lawyer by profession, specializing in corporate law, governance law. But most importantly, I'm a former choir conductor, and I really do understand matters of music. Again, quite excited to be here. Thank you.
Right, of course. If people like Khosi are here, so I feel protected myself. But then today we have a lovely discussion because I want us to reflect on, particularly post-COVID, colleagues, what should we be doing different, rejuvenate the classical music space, and to make it recognized, and just to make sure that you can commercialize it better. So that will be really the discussion today. And we know what COVID has done in the sector, not just only for choirs and opera singers, but generally in the country. There's been poverty and unemployment. And most practitioners have been going through to all the funding bodies to try and survive. So we'll be looking at what we should be doing different to revitalize this genre and make sure that we go forward. But before we can get there, Mike, I'm going to start with you, deliberately so. But surely, before we can start talking about revitalizing ourselves and re-energizing ourselves to become what we want to become, there is someone that might be watching at home, and some are not familiar with our genre. Who are we, and what exactly are we selling in this country?
Wow, it's a profound question. Who are we? We're the ones invited by a higher force, given the message to transform humanity through the power of music. That's who we are. We are not just people who studied music or who are just talented, but people with a purpose to enlighten the world in the matters that are much higher than the physical nature. And our purpose truly extends as far as saying, we are here not to be compared to any other genre, but to stand as the foundation of all other musics. The origins of musics are communal. As choral practitioners, we are community builders. The the origins of choral music are family. We are a people that should be working as a family. But most of all, we are healers. The question is, as part of this answer, are we the healers that are still healthy enough to heal, or are we wounded healers who are now perhaps going through a process which might even self-destruct? Thank you.
Sister Bongile, would you agree that, in fact, when we talk about healing, in your opinion, just 2 or 3 aspects of music that, in your view, so someone who might not be aware of who we are the benefits and are the pointers to you when you say, looking at 1, 2, 3, indeed, we are healing the nation?
I think we should be healers. Whether we are at this point is a point of contention. The reason why we should be healers is because it's not us. It's the music that is king. What we have done is we have become the kings of music. Hence, we are failing in our positioning to do what we are supposed to be doing. Because if you look at it from a perspective of music is king, then you understand the psychological connection, you understand the intellectual connection, you understand the spiritual connection. Because then if you're talking soul, soul is what brings about the healing. But for you to tap into the soul, you have to tap into the spirituality. It's not just notes. Where we've gone wrong is that we've made this a competitive space as opposed to a communal space where we exchange not ideas, we exchange emotions. And we have failed to do that. And we talk about the 3 aspects. There are no 3 aspects. There is one king. Imagine if you had to go to a KZN and say the king has 3 aspects. There's one king. He has his royalty, he has his sovereignty, and that's it. If you start trying to dissect the king, you are taking away his power because you want to box it so that you can manage it. It's not about administration. It's about the role and the positioning. And as long as we don't understand that, we will keep on trying to figure out where we went wrong and what we need to fix.
Sure, that's very profound. And of course, we've got now a member of LOC here, and we live within the government space, municipalities, and the societies we live in. Do you think that the society understands who we are, like the colleagues are explaining now?
Well, I might have to differ a bit. I have an ideology that the society most likely do not get the gist of how our space has been interacting, and more likely because of this is quite a very small space if you look at it. The choral and opera music industry has been actually forgotten in our community. If you look at the numbers over the past decade, you look at the musicians over the past decades, we are actually falling apart. So we need to bring in some movement or a marketable way in order for us to be actually in a position that we feel that we have done much in the fraternity. We are really struggling as musicians, and I believe that by actually getting to do more of these events like the COMFESA, even if it's not just COMFESA that's doing it, it can be done in a different manner. These are really events that we need as a community and as singers for us to be able to get into a marketable place, and also to allow the viewers and everyone actually around our community to be able to, so that our choristers and opera singers can express themselves. So yeah, that's my view.
Yeah. I want to tap into your comment just now, because the topic today, which we're going to get into now, is how should we be molding ourselves to face the challenges that we are facing now, post-COVID, the issues of poverty, unemployment, how we can use our genre further for commercialization of our own artists. But then, of course, this is about music, and Sibongile, I'm going to come to you as well. Music making, the role of making music. What do you think we should be doing better now, post-COVID, to make music, to make our classical music space recognized and therefore sellable to the industry?
It goes back to what I was saying. Music is king. There is no different perspective here. This one we have to be clear about. You ask any good businessman how they make their business a success. They have a product to sell, and there's a demand for that product. If there isn't a demand for that product, you create a demand for that product. If we understand our positioning in terms of healers, let's say choral music takes on a focused path of healing, then choral music needs to go in there and occupy that space. Choral music can't be healing today, competition tomorrow, the other one the other day. Choral music has to find its position. If there's a gap, get into that space, occupy that space, then there's a product, and then create a demand for it so that there's a supply. Because there are choirs in all the communities, in the churches, in the schools, in tertiary institutions. There are choirs everywhere. Male choirs, children's choirs, female choirs, community choirs. They are there. So the supply is there. The demand is not there because we have not created a need for a demand, because we keep second guessing ourselves. And then we say, what are we doing wrong? We haven't had the conversation that says, what is it that we want to sell to a public that is supposed to consume? If you go back to the times of Wama Fort choirs, you go back to Old Mutual when it took over a National Choir Festival. What was the demand? The demand was you create a space for young people where they can go after school so that they are not loitering and engaging in activities that are unpalatable. So you put them in a space where they literally have something to do. A society is buying into that. When the society buys into that, business will enable the process of keeping those kids busy. So if the schools have to close at the end of the day because Otisha have to go home to their families, then the community choirs take over that space where literally you have to then send the people who have nowhere to go. Aftercare. So they go to choir. By the time the parents get home, we're serving. But at the end of that, there's a desired result. And the desired result is that they have a product, which is amaculo that they sing then. Do they then do an oratorio performance, Messiah, or are they then competing at a local level so that they can go to the national? You understand? So, Tina, we haven't determined those things because we are not talking to each other. And if there's no communication, we'll keep on making the same mistakes because wonke umuntu ufuna ukuba a hero and come with a solution. Let's stop the hero complex and agree that there's a need. People are hooked on drugs and all kinds of things because they are idling. So, iroli should be to take away the idle space so that we occupy that space. Healers, then business will buy into it. So we self-determine.
So Mark, I'm going to come to you first just now. And Sbo is talking about some of the serious things, but let's assist the South Africans watching at home. What are these interventions, and you're pregnant with them, but what are these interventions that you should be putting in place physically and practically to say, let's create a demand, let's supply something and create a demand. What are those things for someone at home that can say, okay, we're talking about this. Are we talking about concerts here? Are we talking about competitions? Are we talking about what is this agenda we should be employing?
First of all, we need to break the barriers that hinder our audiences from enjoying our music. We are sitting in a hall day in, day out. We move from stage, we fill up the hall, and then we say the event was a success when it was us sitting in the hall. So when we do a head count, we are counting the performers who are doubling as audiences. The first thing we must do is to bring total strangers, people who don't sing, complete strangers to the craft, and say, come and try this thing that we love so much, and you might go back with a new experience. That's the first thing. So when you do audience development, it's not just bringing numbers. You then use that opportunity to educate without numbing those who are watching to a level that you assume they don't know because you know your craft more. Allow them the space to criticize it. Allow them not to know your Baroque terminology. Allow them just to sit back and listen to this thing and not give it a name. That's the first thing we should do if we are to change. So we are responding to this demand. We assume we have a demand. What we have is a product, but this demand will only come like someone who's introduced to golf. It is an acquired taste. You go swing your club today, and maybe you miss a few balls. You swing again tomorrow. They'll keep swinging by attending our events, and one day they'll become connoisseurs and say, I now know this craft. They can talk a little bit about it. So I think that's one thing we need to do. Two, to back Sibongilela, we need to almost remove this idea that certain individuals are the only ones endowed with the capacity to communicate the power of this music. We need to say, if, for example, at an association level, other than coming together for coordinating events, what are we doing to transform members of society? So perhaps the third and final one would be create a product that is beyond our own comfort. We love opera. Let's agree we studied opera. Some of us did, some of us didn't. We look at the landscape and say, in the current format, and I can say boldly, the only full-time opera company in South Africa is Cape Town Opera. The only full-time. Yeah. And they don't employ more than 40 singers. I happen to sit on the board of Cape Town Opera. And if the only company employs less than 40 singers, it says we have an excess supply of singers and less demand in terms of space where those singers can practice. So we have to rethink the places where the graduates will go. Sure. We are creating an industry full of fundis who have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So this is the one area. We have to rethink this thing. Jobe Kulmango aftercare, we've got to say, where are these people working? If they are not working in the company they were hoping to work for, where are they working right now? How many of them can put bread on the table? This is an uncomfortable question, but it's a question you got to ask. At association level, at individual level, we got to say, what are we doing? So do we take ourselves seriously enough to see ourselves as an industry? Are we even an industry?
Good
Thank
question.
you.
And obviously we're talking about good things here where obviously the choirs and even individual opera singers live within communities. And the question would be, what the structures that exist in terms of governance, do you think that there's a role that governance structures like choral associations, administrators, government, municipalities can play in terms of tapping into our agenda and moving it forward? What do you think should be their role?
Look, if you look at our sector, and I'm focusing on the choral, classical, and opera sector, are we adequately regulated if there is any regulation of some sort to be able to put appropriate measures in place for all players? I think regulation for me is the biggest thing. We've got different structures at various levels in our sector. Currently we're having COMFESA, the objective of which is to bring order into the system. You know, to look at all aspects of the society, to look at all kind of structures that have been created, and to come up with measures to support those structures. So, as COMFESA being an umbrella body, we've got to put men and women into the room and talk about regulation in order to take this sector forward. We've been talking about commercialization. It is not going to be easy for all of us to make money, to be able to support our choristas and all other players. If you talk to potential sponsors today, they ask you a simple question. You know, how are we going to make sure that our business relationship is trustworthy?
Exactly.
That's the biggest thing. They're not going to put money on the table where they do not know where the regulation lies. Matters of ethics. Our structures ought to be run by men and women of integrity. Those structures should be appropriately governed. And we all have to understand what we mean by governance. It's about order. It's about all of us here as a committee knowing our role and responsibilities and knowing what is it that we have to do in order to add value to the system. Let me pause there. I think I'll come back at some point.
So obviously you member of LOC here, and in your observation, have you done enough? Have you done enough to make sure that people understand who we are and they understand our product? Are we communicating in your view? What should we be doing different?
All right, from my point, I think we've done whatever we needed to do in terms of marketing, trying to reach out to all our singers, our musicians as well. And also, we as, not just as a LOC, but we as musicians, we come from a very, sometimes disadvantaged background. So it takes quite a lot of resources sometimes, but to do some of the things that COMFESA as the LOC has done. But at the end, at least we as COMFESA succeeded about, and they've produced a number of presentations and events where we're trying to reach out to our society and market our genre, which is the opera and choral music fraternity. So I believe that we have a space to grow as well. This is not the end, this is just the beginning. We've got a very serious work to do going forward. So I just want to say that we must just be thankful of what we're having currently. And thank also all the members that were organizing such an event. So we really appreciate the effort and everything they've done.
And as Sibongile, you've been talking about communicating. How should we be doing this? Because I want us to build South Africans really. How should we come? And who's going to start?
You know, if we want to have a desired result, what is our desired result at the end of this discussion? Then we have to agree that we have to be honest about what we are saying to each other. Let's start here. Who should be communicating? All the people with the egos. Let's start there.
Yeah.
All the people with the egos. Because those are the people that have destroyed this industry over the past 20 years with their egos. And can I say it straight without apology? It's not the women. It's the men that sit in panels, in committees, abo presidenti, abo head of this one, abo whatever else it's called, chairperson of the other one, the founder of this and the other one. Why do we have so many organizations that have zero direction?
Egos.
That's exactly where the communication needs to happen. And by saying what I'm saying, I am not sitting here ngifuna ukuthi angibhece umuntu ngesizulu, angibhece umuntu ngithi you do things wrong. We have sat in a meeting with many, and I would go as far as to say most of these men that I'm talking about. They know the problem. They know where it goes wrong. I would wish ukuthi more women would be included. Why am I the only woman sitting on this panel? Where are the women? Bakhona baya compose, bakhona baya conduct. Why is it that when you men, ngikhuluma nani manje? When you men sit in a room, don't call each other out and say, you know, the testosterone is a little bit too strong. We need to dilute what is happening because asisezwane silelelene ngamandla. Because that is where the problem is. When women come in, you guys tone down, but you are dumbing down the role that women should be playing in the choral fraternity. And when I say women, I don't mean the feminines. I'm talking women because of their gender. Any woman, it could be LGBTQI+, it could be anybody, it could be trans, but it's got to be women. And choral fraternity is so patriarchal, and you refuse to shift from your old-fashioned ideas that are not accommodative of fresh ideas. That's why young people find it difficult to relate to what you guys are doing. Baroque, great, it's lovely music, but then what happened to doing choral music for young people? Piano. I do this work, I'm talking about work I'm doing with young people right now in the Free State.
Sure.
You get them to sing piano or choral music. What do you think would happen to the community if you just started saying, AKA has just passed, let's just do an entire tribute for the whole year. He has a catalog. Let young people's choirs just sing that music. Communication. But of
course, you know, one of the things that we as COMFESA are standing for as well is exactly that, to make sure that deliberately so we involve women in the advancement. And you rightfully say, because and God knows why in his wisdom he created women. Because when women come, women tone down, and they reflect, and all the egos go down actually. And isn't that something wonderful that we're learning today, that we should be taking home? But there is a question here that maybe let me throw it to Hoshi, because I want to single out the choirs who are managed by conductors. They live in the society, and what do you think we should be doing in the communities we live in to make a stamp of our product and this supply and create a demand in our communities, assuming we acquire. Let's talk to a choir that is in Limpopo, in KwaZulu-Natal, in KZN, in Western Cape, here in Free State. What should that choir be doing, in your opinion, to make it visible and grow this thing?
Look, it's about time that we interface with the right people. And talking about choir itself, you know, there's support that is required in our communities because poor women and men gather on a daily basis to sing the notes, to do the lyrics, but they don't know beyond these walls where they have to face. Sure. That is the biggest challenge. I think, you know, the time of talk shops is over. We need men and women who can bring meaningful solutions to the table and really fold their sleeves to support our communities. And we've got to start there. Forget about all of us who are coming from big cities, because we will always come here and talk. What is it that we are going to put in place to help the young people that we have seen today, the talent that requires to be nurtured for a better tomorrow in our sector?
And obviously, you stand for COMFESA, and so do I. And I really strongly believe that you can play a huge role in being a vehicle of that communication in communities. Have we done enough, Hoshi? And if not, what is the plan for COMFESA to make sure that we by force or crooks, that we communicate, we make ourselves known, and we make music, like my sister was saying, that is relevant to this era now, and make ourselves visible in those communities. What is in the plan for COMFESA?
Look, we started a few years ago, and our work is beginning to bear fruits. We started last year doing what we are doing here in other provinces. COMFESA is not about, it's not just a structure sitting at national level. It's about all of us who are involved in this fraternity. I think if you look at the constitution of COMFESA, the kind of structures that we should be having in place, compared to what we are having on the ground, you will be shocked. We saw an exodus of men and women who were elected at some conference to run COMFESA. They are no longer here. But it's upon us who remain behind to invite people and just do the right thing, explain to people what COMFESA is about, how do we deliver in terms of the mandate that we carry. And it takes us back to communication. I don't think we are communicating enough, and that gap has to be closed.
Yeah.
But with this beginning, tomorrow there has to be a plan that can be implemented within a shorter turnaround time.
And I think obviously one of the things we're taking today from what you're saying is I think we're making a promise, not only a promise but an action, that we are going to communicate, we are going to involve the government, the stakeholders first, to force recognition. But we're going to work underground to make sure the communities are involved. So it's the top-down and bottom-up approach that we are going to follow. And I think it's what you're trying to paint here.
Well, exactly. So the appetite is there. We have been talking to different stakeholders, and government is keen to come on board. Why don't we explore that further? Go beyond government, there's corporate, and I think we've got great men who are able to talk sense into those structures that are running those institutions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And Mike, I'm sure, surely there is a role that I'm going to pick on two areas, government and number two, media needs to play in terms of driving our agenda. In your view, how should we be involving media and government to see us? Because I mean, if you go to any radio stations now, no one plays an opera song. You can, of course, FM will never play unless you go to a choral music program, like Ngwenga or Mhlobo Wenene, whatever choral program they have there. But they won't play choral music, GC or SA singers just out of the blue. Why is that? How do we make sure that media recognizes our existence and the government at large?
Look, luckily I have been in the media space, having yesteryear worked for Classic FM, which was a purely dedicated station for classical music. So you would hear opera any day of the week. The first challenge we face with the mainstream media and particularly the SABC broadcasting entities, the choral music program is left for a Sunday session. That's the first mistake. So it's like our music only can be played on Sunday, not any other day.
For 1 hour even
Yeah, for
there.
1 hour. So all the choral programs, they will be fighting for the same audience. In fact, at some point, they are playing concurrently, and the listeners have to choose which one to follow. And also, the challenge on the media side is that we have not done enough to develop our own journalists. You see, in the classical arts, for example, if you're going to listen to the London Symphony Orchestra CD, the person who's going to review this CD is a journalist, a music journalist, having studied this craft, understands the score, doesn't just write emotions, really can talk intelligence and educate people so that people can take an informed decision whether to buy the CD or not. When we've got concerts and competitions, you would have a music critique. Like right now, we should be sitting with someone here from the Star or City Press or Daily Maverick, who's an art journalist, taking notes, critiquing the work
and
that we
publishing
do.
what we do.
And publishing what we do. So we have not made friends with that sector.
So we are to blame.
Yes, we are to blame. You see, rest his soul, Uncle Agri-Cluster. He fought for us when we were busy just folding our arms. Rest his soul, Prof. Kumalo. These were giants who understood the power of media. Agri-Cluster was not just a glorified editor of Sowetan. He understood that the message of choral music can be shared. So this is our mistake. We are not developing journalists. And where there are small trickles of good journalism coming up, we are not supportive. And I can count one. Sbusiso Njeza is running the choralist, and I'm sure because it's under-resourced, he only can host it when there is some small change sitting somewhere.
Exactly.
And those of us who will follow on the lines, if it's Sydney Masetle, Lomfana was a Northwest, why should we even listen to him? So there are issues that are much deeper that we don't discuss because we're not willing to discuss them. How we separate, and we can even make these young budding persons to compete so negatively against each other instead of supporting them across the board. So that is our media problem. There are people in the sector. If Okosi would start a news agency for the arts, the choral people would be among the first ones to find out mandate and this is where we're sitting.
And
with
who
the
is
problem.
he?
And who is he? What association does it represent? And for that reason, these things don't flourish because these young people are innovative and they could take us much, much further. So there is people with talent and drive to do it. Are we there to support them? And if they said to us, we would charge a commercial fee for us to broadcast your work, how many of us would be willing to pay?
Exactly.
You
You
see, and that's where the challenge comes in. So this young man has got to bring in camera people and ask them to do it for free. It will never happen in any other sector except us. Now, quickly moving to government. Government, as far as I'm concerned, you've got the people who are employed to process applications and so forth, but we also need to go into that space. When there are posts that are advertised, we need to send our people who know our craft to apply for those posts. For example, we think everyone who should talk about music must be a musician. For all I care, you can take someone with a BCom account and a media interest or an arts interest to go and apply for that job, so that when there are things about the arts that are spoken about, someone who understands our message is sitting there. Sometimes in government, I don't blame them. You have people who just think that our work is to apply for grants and all that, and they can just reject your application without thinking it through because they don't know what it stands for. So I think we have to find strategic ways to work with government and say, in this department, where we think the government doesn't understand us, let's arrange a workshop to favor these people who work for the state with an understanding of what it is we do and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we will fight with people who should be our friends, and we will create enemies where we shouldn't be. But I think we have an opportunity. This COMFESA platform is already a sign that DSAC has put some resources to this thing. So there is already a relationship going, right? Now, how do you tap into that and grow it? I'll give you a simple picture. We moved from Gauteng, we're here. Do you know which other sector has been touched? Tourism. We're staying at a hotel.
Yeah.
The transport sector, because we poured petrol to get here, that sector has been touched by the coral sector. But someone is doing makeup here. The beauty industry has been touched by this sector. But we don't, the catering, someone is doing catering here. And they were not going to cook if the 60 people who sing in the choir were not here.
And yet we're not actually talking about these things you're mentioning now, and we're quiet, and we moan and groan and say, well, nobody is for us. And we're not talking to them and say, this is what we're bringing to the table. And if I hear you, government is listening, and to their defense, and COMFESA is a living example, they are willing to listen. I mean, even the office of the current minister is willing to listen to us, but we're not talking enough.
That is precisely what I'm saying, that we already have an example of success.
Yeah.
I'm not even taking anything away. I'm saying where we differ, it is our job to begin to put our people who are more knowledgeable about the craft. You know, in sports, Robert Marawa does not have to play football, but he has to take great interest. And guess what?
Sure.
His views in this country, they matter.
They matter.
They are not just the views of some young man from KZN. People understand when Robert speaks, that view is taken as a voice from a principal in the sector.
Exactly.
And we need to create our own principles so that when we engage with government, we can engage in a meaningful way.
Sure.
And I think we also need to say to government, let's give you an audit of the kind of people you find in choirs. You find lawyers in choirs. You find doctors in choirs. You find pharmacists in choirs. You find auditors in choirs. Ukwinzi will not tell you now. He comes with a very solid background in geology and water technologies. He's a chorister, but he's actually coming as a serious technician in the environmental sector. Someone will just say, he's just a tenor singer. He's not just a tenor singer. So our sector has got many intelligent people. We need to mobilize these intelligences and create one mind body. And we must not surrender our thought to one individual. We must say we have collective brains. We are now going to tap into the collective mind to create a better world. That way we will engage better with, because I mean, in the school sector, the Department of Education is doing so much to assist, to generate a whole community of singers. The SASCA program is one of the richest programs you can ever think of. In fact, it's the biggest ISTED fort we have on the continent. And it is upon us to defend and promote it, to support it, and make sure that the next generation does not find itself in our toxic conversations. Thank you.
And I think one thing we're taking from your earlier discussion, Mike, is around the communication and making ourselves recognizable, is the fact that, you know, we need to use media in our own localities. I mean, there's no town that doesn't have a newspaper publisher these days, no matter how small, or a local radio station. We hold concerts. If you're sitting at home, it's one task we should be doing, and the message we're sending to you. Don't do a concert. Don't do workshops and seminars and things without involving the media space. Who else in the radio stations and the TVs? Who else is going to assist us getting known where we stay and what we do and what we are about? So this is one thing that definitely we're taking on. But Smogile, there's a sad part around opera singers. When you see them, it's sad. They graduate, They flock overseas to Italy, Germany, Spain, America, because there is, according to them, there is no future for them in South Africa. They graduate in all colleges and UCTs and UKZNs and all TUTs and all these centers. What is chasing them away? And we spoke about, we're going to talk about that now, maybe diversifying or remodeling ourselves to modern era, in terms of making music. But what is chasing these people away, and what should we be doing as a country to retain our opera singers?
I'll go back to what I said. If I'm going to answer these questions, then I'm going to be honest, and everybody's going to be uncomfortable just about now. Get ready to be uncomfortable. I'm just about to make this room even smaller than it is now. What is chasing our opera singers away from this country is that we still have a systemic problem. The opera world is very racist in South Africa.
Sure. Yeah.
They don't want to hear me say this, but abelungu basiphethe kabuhlungu kwa-opera. The fact that we are still called black voices. Show me what a black voice looks like.
Exactly.
It's just a voice. Why is it black choirs and white choirs and colored? Why do we still have that type of classification as a country? So we have a systemic problem. As long as South Africa still holds on to the toxic traits of our history of apartheid, abantwana bethu will keep leaving this country and going overseas because we are not making space for them. Before, there were only white people singing opera in their companies. They had Abu Kpebo, Pakti, NAPAC. Those were their councils. And they were not about black people. Yes, a Sybil Hartman and a Virginia Davis breaks through into that space, but it's through a lot of fight. If you ask them their history, they had to travel in a very uncomfortable way with the rest of the company because they were not white. And Cape Town Opera is the only opera company we have. Why? Because we still keep pushing the narrative yokuthi abelungu yibo abakwazi ukwenza opera South Africa, and they still hold on because now yibo abanikazi be opera. When black people go into that space, they are not being trained to be management. And no, let me finish. I said I'm going to make the space very small. They are not being trained to be management. They are not being trained to be directors. They are not being trained to run any of those departments, including finance. We have so many accountants. Even the legal department of Cape Town Opera is not run by black people. That space is run by white people. Every time Guno CEO or Musha, we Cape Town Opera umlungu. Every time there's an artistic director, Cape Town Opera umlungu. Why? Because the systemic problem remains, and we are doing absolutely nothing to fix it. And I'll tell you, if you stand in those corridors, they say, no, we'll train them for a year. After that, they must go to Germany. They must go audition overseas. Why must they go to Germany if there are theaters in this country that can accommodate their craft? Why wouldn't the Department of Arts and Culture pay for those spaces to be utilized to create employment? If we are talking about creating employment and 9 provinces can accommodate 9 opera companies, how many people are we talking about that will be employed? From transport to costumes to wardrobe to furniture to props to wigs to makeup and then the performers, the singers, the actors, the orchestras, all those people. Let's think rationally. And then let's think about the people who are training these people. Angetitina, we don't want to allow people to go into spaces and train our people to be as good or better than what we call our stars. And then we send them overseas to sing in choruses overseas. Because now, but they have to limit how much of what we give them they can put on their stages, because they still need to give their own people first opportunities.
Exactly.
So you can only have so many South Africans taking center stage. But if we just allowed our own to take center stage here at home, if they wanted to go overseas, then let them go overseas. But let's make it a desirable space for even those people outside of this country to want to come into our country and work here, because it's a desirable space. But it isn't, because the systemic problem is there. Go insidious, go untidy. It's a stinky space.
While we agree, and obviously, and don't give a mic away because we're coming up with some beautiful things here. We have a lot of brains in this country. I'm talking about, look at this panel here. Just for example, what is stopping Mike, Tim, Quincy, Kosi, yourself, for instance, to not look at these white-owned organizations and start our own? Mike, starting with Spo. What's stopping us? Let's not look next door, but what's stopping us?
What is stopping us is exactly what I said before. We are self-destructive. We don't communicate with each other. We compete in the worst possible ways. When Sibongile does something, instead of saying, Saswami, what you're doing is incredible, how can we join and help and grow? We say,
who the hell are you?
Why would she be doing 1, 2, 3? If Mike is doing something, instead of saying, Mike is actually brilliant when he does certain things, where can we help? How do we help you to grow? Where do we bring in our expertise? We are all sitting there saying, oh Shem, and we're not going to help him. We are waiting for each other to fail so that we can point and laugh. We need to grow up. We need to grow out of a mentality that is not taking us forward. And in mentality layer, it's a residual of the abuse. We are mentally abused by a system that we inherited, and that's why it remains a systemic problem. As Kaga Pomit, we haven't outgrown the apartheid mentality of abantu abamnyama are not good enough, and we keep saying it to each other and ourselves. I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. And every time you do something, it has to be not good enough for me to be good enough.
Yeah.
That's stupidity
Again, it comes back to egos, yeah. But Mike, should we not maybe be looking at those differences and taking advantage of them somehow? The fact that you don't like him because he started something progressive, but you say, who the hell is Hosi? But should we not be looking at that different and taking some positivity in that and say, well, stuff him, I'm going to do it anyway? But what should be the approach? I'm not feeding you now, but what should be the approach?
Yeah, look, I think the points that are being raised are quite valid. And they are talking to our self-concept. Who are we in front of our own eyes? I'll give a picture, and I will not go maybe in the beauty as a Cape Town, look at the rest of the country and say, okay, see park Cape Town, but as a big state theater, City Theater, which was built for the very craft. It hasn't got that. We go to Bloemfontein. Nai Theater was built for the same craft. We are not doing anything there. Let's go to KZN. It was built for this crafty opera. We are not doing anything there. Every town, the very town hall we are sitting in here, you can do a small production here. So where we can do, because le company singai discuss, but we could be discussing how are we developing ourselves? How should we be equipping ourselves? Being a developer, the next generation of finance people within the arts sector, which partners can we get from various parts of the world? We want a peer learning opportunity, say now with Opera Bergen in Norway or Zurich Opera House in Switzerland. We've got these singers, so that then our attention moves from that little corner which has got, it's doing what it can, surviving in the environment, in our complexities. But if you look at the number of singers we've got, it is upon us to make it compelling and tell a compelling story,
to our government and corporates that which you see there in Cape Town is a small example of what you can do across the country.
Yeah.
That way you would also move away from the view that people have to be removed in order for me to be relevant. Because now we live in this timeline where people sit in meetings where Michael Dingan's name is mentioned. They will then say, but don't you think you should move now, Gungenu team? When people promote Khosi's work, Michael Dingan finds an opportunity to tell people that Khosi is not good enough, this and that. So we spend more time discrediting one another instead of really finding what is good, as you say, my big sister, what works with this artist that I can collaborate with. And this way, I think, I mean, every little dorpy, but each of those towns that we come from has got a hall like this one. Every town. So actually we should be having enough employment for everyone. There's no need for people to even crisscross to move to another province. Kone Wheatbank, Emalahleni, that town hall could be a small theater. Corner in Nelspruit, you will find that. So at Petersburg, there is such a thing. So in my view, and whether you call it Polokwane or whatever, the point is that there is such a hall, a craddock, a small hall that can be converted into a theater space. So we need to begin to create small things. I saw some people in Port Elizabeth. They were trying something PE opera. I think that is a plausible act. And it could be supported. If someone in Bloemfontein does that, it should be supported. So maybe we should sit less and less talking to media. In our social media, particularly there is the Green app. We should mind what we discuss in that Green app. That Green app, the airtime we spent there, we have to say, is it valuable? This airtime, would it buy at a stock exchange?
Sure.
What we are saying in this Green app right now, would it be a worthy currency? Would investors listen to what I'm saying? Or what would they see? They see that we are happy. For example, while we were busy upset with NCF and this and that, the big, wonderful Old Mutual said, we are no longer interested. So our very own big competition collapsed in front of our eyes because of the manner in which we use our media. So we have to re-educate ourselves. Masnama partners, however small, we need to know how to treat partners. Sometimes you get sponsors, we don't know how to treat them when they're in the room. We talk to them anyhow. From time to time we tell them they don't know anything about the craft. They should just bring their money and shut up. And with that, the marketing director is just looking at you, thinking, on Monday I'm scraping this thing of yours. These are the last trophies you're getting. Continue thinking you've got the power that you've got, but I'm taking my money with. And they take that money to areas where they will be respected. Sponsors will not sit in a room where they are being treated like children. You know, there are many artists who will not go overseas, but who are good enough to be on stage. We have to ask, how many of them? Some children can't afford a roll on. We've got to be ashamed. We tell them you should study music. Study music and do what? You know, so we have to deal with a real issue. But if we have authority, how do we use it? And that is why we have to sit less and less and sit more and more in meetings that are constructive, as Uprakosi says. Then we'll talk to corporate. Corporate does not want to meet with people who are bickering. If a Ndlovu youth choir, a new choir that's less than 3 years old, wins international awards, and it has taken an innovative approach, if the Mzansi youth choir sings corporates every second day, and our mainstream choirs are begging for 10,000, Mzansi youth choir does not do a gig for less than 50K. That would be a very bad budget. Ndlovu youth choir, a new choir, nothing less than 80K. They have commercialized themselves, they take themselves seriously, and they're respected by corporates, while we are sitting bickering. But also their music understands that you can't just sing opera. There'll be few who love opera. Mix your program. some people love jazz. We come there, no, ndiyamazi uVerdi, uyamazi uVerdi, kodwa lo tata uhleli phaya, akamazi uVerdi, wazi uMiriam Makeba, khoculele la tata uMiriam Makeba, abe happy, onwabe. Nkosi.
Hey, I'm sure you can, you can just look at the passion that this team here has, and we can speak until kubuya, lokuthiwa uyabuya. Yeah, thank you, colleagues, and thank you very much. We're going to have your last words just now, but I think it's as per what we're saying and what we have received from the professionals sitting here. We need to start not looking next door and looking at someone who to ask. Let's start doing things ourselves. Let's start to communicate who we are. Let's start loving each other, not caring. Let's start tapping into those differences and making a difference. Let's start using the media to make awareness and recognition of who we are. Let's start using organizations like associations and a federation like COMFESA to make a stamp, to talk to society, to lobby government, but to also talk to choirs and advise them how they should penetrate recognition in their localities. And let's use our own theaters, town halls, to push our agenda and create our existence. And the media is a very important space that we start utilizing them as well to move forward. But of course, our last words before we say goodbyes, Horst, I'm going to start with you. Just 1 minute max. What can you say?
Well, quickly, it is said that as South Africans, in order for us to do the right thing, we need a piece of legislation to be enacted. And I know I talked about regulation when we started. And I think regulation is the way to go. If you look at what happened in the country, in order for black people to participate in the economy, government had to enact the BEE legislation just to force people to do the right thing. That's very sad. And I think our sector, it's never too late for us to regroup, to relook our sector, and really put measures, workable measures in place to take us forward.
And I'm sure you think COMFESA can play a big role in that unification of the sector.
Yep.
Mike, your closing comments?
I think we need more collaboration amongst various sectors. I think no sector should, no association should die in order for the other to live. And I don't think we should all fight for the same soul and make people feel that if they choose to be in the company of the others, therefore they have chosen the wrong company. I think we should allow our people space to find expression, and there's more power in making music as a family. If we fail to do everything beyond legislation, let's go to the first route. Why did God plant in you this gift of music? And how are you using it now? How much of that ego is now disturbing that gift of music from achieving its true purpose and goal? So that once that fire dies, this is where you see the toxicity. The fire needs to be rekindled. We need to take each other's candle and say, let me light your candle again. It seems to be dying of wrong things. Sure. Let it come back. It's good to be in the same room with you, and it's good for you to be chosen to do the work today. It's good for someone else to do it tomorrow. And I don't have, if I'm with COMFESA, it does not mean I have to hate ECMA. If I'm with ECMA, I don't have to hate Imvung in KZN. Exactly. I just can be a complete musician without thinking others are evil in their existence.
And you're a living example of that, Mike.
We're clear. Thank you.
Sis Bogil.
Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of today. My last words would be, we have to go back, as Mike said, to music is king. We don't do this for our egos and pride. We do this because God put it in us for a specific purpose. And what was that purpose? It depends. He's a lawyer, he'll tell you. When you ask a question legally, it depends. So, what was the purpose for the music? It depends. It depends on the positioning. Don't just say, namhlanje the purpose is a competition. No, that's a project-based type of thinking. A holistic way of looking at it is, I'm feeling down. I put on music. You are creating something of a healing mechanism. Angeke uzophuza grandpa, but you will take a song 3 times a day.
Wow.
Doctor's prescription.
Hey. And of course, I cannot not re-mention this one. Let's learn to be inclusive and include abo mama, amantomazana, abo sisi in building this, and we've deliberately so. And then she also spoke about re-looking at the music today. Because really, if we don't do that, and Oprah Maikuka to Kulumanga Wuti, I'm not going to repeat. But if we don't go that, we just stay in one space, we will expire. Quincy, your last words?
Okay, I think that we should show more commitment. Moreover, we should groom our singers and musicians from an early stage, because at this stage now we are coming and we are realizing a lot of stuff in terms of toxicity and so much. So I think this thing, it needs to start from the beginning for the next generation. And as I was talking about synergy, we also need to be team players actually. We need not to be having differences we must have differences outside, but within the fraternity we need to help each other. This is quite a very great opportunity, and I believe our listeners and everyone in the community is listening on what great ideas have been shared on the panel discussions here. From my view, it's just commitment, commitment, and commitment.
Thank you very much, and colleagues, you are wonderful. You've been amazing, and God bless you. You know, and you can just see with this wisdom that we have, and it's just 4 or 5 people here, but there's so much that this country can tap into. How much more if we can actually bring together all the professionals and they'll bring little skills they have, we can overturn this country into something beautiful. Differences aside. So thank you very much for watching at home. Timothy Wagazulu, and we have learned. Please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and visit our website on Choral Music Federation of South Africa. We'll be posting all the comments that we receive and all the action plans that we'll be taking to different provinces. Don't go anywhere, because very shortly the concert is coming. You don't want to miss that.